Pusha T said I was a real king of the YouTube. A real king of the fucking YouTube. Yeah, that was a good line off of his new album project. Shout out to Pusha T. Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, Internet's busiest music nerd. And as you may already know, it's List Week 2015. And I'm listing out basically the musical highlights for me of the year. Favorite EPs, singles, albums. However, we're going to kick things off with List Week on a bit of a negative note. Before I get into the records that I really loved this year, we're going to sort of flush the bad juju out of our system.
You mean like this? Like with the poopy?
No, I don't quite mean like that, but sort of similar. This is a list of the top 10 worst records I had to review this year. They're not the 10 worst albums of the year, point blank period, because there are plenty of awful albums that I completely glossed over because they were so bad I didn't want to review them. There was really no point. And I'm sure there are tons of other awful records that I just didn't hear this year because I don't actively go out seeking terrible music. When you're reviewing a few hundred albums a year, just some of it shows up on your doorstep. It sort of comes with the territory. You can't stop it. And it seems like this year, for whatever reason, there were quite a few albums I responded to very negatively, and I thought that they were worth noting in a video like this because the scars that they've given me, the mental scars, I will most likely be carrying for at least the next few years. So let's get into it. At number 10, we have the Machine Gun Kelly album, General Admission. Now, being a white person, I don't have anything against white rappers just on the principle of being white and participating in hip-hop, a predominantly and historically black art form. But this album sort of seems to feed into every single cliche you would expect there to be on a white rapper record, and it does it in such an unentertaining way. It's like you can see every single punch this album has coming. He's like a so much less emotionally engaging and lyrically intelligent version of Eminem with way more emotional baggage than he should have. So, yeah, even though this thing at one point was the #1 record in the country, and lots of his fans were happy to remind me of that, and that's fine, you know, totally cool that the dude is still seeing success this deep into his career. It's good that somebody is succeeding in the music world, but me personally did not dig this project at all. Following that, I did a collaborative review for this record with my buddy Mike Seatown, and it was really hard to sit through this album, and I got really excited to listen to this thing, given some of the teaser tracks and the fact that the production was so heavy and there were some connections to one of my favorite metalcore bands, Nails, with this group. But the Twitching Tongues record, Disharmony, as Mike Seatown will tell you as well if you go and ask him, the music on this thing is like some of the most dime a dozen hardcore and metalcore that you will have heard released this year, but it's really the vocals that are the cherry on top of this cupcake of sadness. I can kind of see what they're doing, and I can appreciate that they're so strange, but simultaneously they make the album really hard to listen to, and they're funny just thinking back to the way that they sound. But, you know, you might dig this album more than me, and if you do, that's totally fine, but this thing makes me giggle. And the band actually caught the review that we did of this record, and they thought it was funny too, and they seemed like they were good sports. So, you know, shout out to the band too. I don't care for the record, but I gave it an honest shot, and I wish you guys more records in the future. If you're making headway with this stuff, do what you're doing, man. Following that, we have the new Foxing album, Dealer. This record was just so hard to sit through. Even harder to sit through some of the records in this list that were so garish because the singing or maybe a certain element of what is in the music is awful, because at least then it's so bad that it becomes at least intriguing in a way. Whereas this record is just a bland mush of every single alternative, indie, and post-rock cliche you can name, just thrown into a list, assembled into a bunch of bland, forgettable songs. And now that I think about it, I can't remember not a single musical moment from this LP, despite having listened to it numerous times in preparation for the review I did of this album. But that's exactly what was wrong with this LP. It was just so bland, plain, and forgettable, and had absolutely no distinct characteristics to it whatsoever. Following that, we have the new Willow Smith album, which is easily one of the most airheaded and effortless art pop albums I've heard in a long time. This thing sounds like it was merely just pulled together to further enhance Willow's internet presence. Like, oh, she's doing albums now too, and they're like left field indie artsy albums. I can't even say I see a shred of artistic merit in this record, because it feels like track for track that nobody on this thing really tried. You know, either that or this is their version of trying, which seems to be nowhere near what your average career artist tries to do when coming together with a full-length album. But the next person in this list, oh, he tried. And he tries very hard, which is part of what makes his music so hard to listen to. The preachiness, the cringy lines, the ridiculous song topics. I'm talking about Hopsin. Pound Syndrome. That line about the man who invented college never going to college, unfortunately that is going to haunt Hopsin for the rest of his career. And what is funny about this LP though is that inadvertently he did come together with one of the better songs of his career, where he's essentially just making fun of Future and Young Thug, I believe, on the song No Words. But on this record, Hopsin continues on this trend of telling other people what they should think and trying to educate and school people while simultaneously making a few jokes here and there that are kind of funny, like, all right, you made fun of somebody and it was kind of cool, but that's not even a sliver of what the bulk of this album does, which is just put on this air of pretentiousness as Hopsin analyzes the world from the viewpoint of like a 15-year-old atheist. But whatever, even this album had its merits, its technical merits in comparison to this one. The new Goldlink album, and after that, we didn't talk. Goldlink for a little while seemed to be this really big hyped DC artist that had a really strong underground buzz, and that buzz didn't shy away once the release of this album came out. This was his biggest commercial project to date, so I was pretty excited to try it out given that his fans loved it so much, and I was just shocked to hear someone that sounded like a mere Chance the Rapper copycat, but with nowhere near as much talent, and somebody who sort of seemed to have a good grasp of what made for great rap verses and some good bars as well, but he rarely takes advantage of that talent in favor of just trying to sing for almost every track on this thing, and his singing vocals are god-awful. There's no reason for him to sing this often on this project, especially given that he had access to guest singers, which he could have had on here to sing for him instead. But no, he insisted on singing on pretty much every song from this project, which made it just so unbearable. Not only that, but the concept that I think this album was trying to string together was super weak. A lot of the lyrics warranted a lot of eye rolls. This project had a lot of heart, but it didn't have a lot of focus, or even that much in the way of ideas to actually carry an album's length worth of material from beginning to end and have it be interesting, engaging, and so on and so forth. But this album was nowhere near as taxing as the next record on this list. Though this album did have its highlights, I will say, this album did have its highlights. It did have a handful of good tracks on it, but this thing was well over an hour. And a lot of that hour was some of the most obnoxious music I heard this year. I'm talking about Little Dickie's Professional Rapper. From the get-go, I found Little Dicky really annoying with all these just very hokey comedy tracks that were about pre-gaming and getting laid and so on and so forth. I could have taken him as just simply a comedy rapper, you know, just kind of like a bit of a Lonely Island offshoot or something like that. I could have admired him from that standpoint if he just kind of took that role, accepted it, and exceeded at it. I may not have bought any of his records. I mean, I'm not even really that much of a Lonely Island fan, and what Little Dicky in terms of comedy rap seems to be doing is definitely less than. But then this new record over here introduced this really ugly duality where little Dickie on releasing all these ridiculous, silly, just harebrained comedy but also conceptual tracks, but simultaneously he drops all these songs and all these bars that remind you that he also wants to be taken seriously as a rapper. He wants to change the game. He wants to actually impress you and have you think he's like this really cool, awesome, talented guy who you would put into your top 10 and not just this ha-ha, funny ha-ha rapper, when in fact that's all he is. And unless he just gives up that side of his persona, I don't see him accelerating or exceeding at anything else. And just all the weird features on this thing, and the not funny jokes, and the songs that just go on way too freaking long. I'm getting a headache just thinking about this album, but the deeper I get into this list, I'm just getting more and more headaches because the list just grows more and more challenging. And the next album I have on this list is the new Dance Gavin Dance album. Instant Gratification, which is anything but. This is one of the noisiest and most unfulfilling and most ear-grating post-hardcore records I've heard in a long time, complete with like a really bad Linkin Park quality rap verse toward the second half of the album that just had me. This album is certainly technical in a sense, and while I don't enjoy a lot of technical rock music, I can at least respect that I guess the fans really enjoy the technical proficiency of those artists, you know, like Animals as leaders and stuff like that, and that's why they go to that music. I don't really like it. It sounds a little mechanical, a little robotic to me, but still, I guess that requires someone to have a certain musical taste or whatever. But I can't even see the merit behind the technicality on this thing, because it's not like the playing is that flashy, or it's that dense, or it's that intricate. It's just unbearably chaotic. And on top of that, it's topped with the kind of vocal work I would expect out of like a cut-rate emo or screamo band. But as we go further down this list, these albums do get harder to listen to, and it's certainly harder to give a listen to all 90 minutes of Miley Cyrus's latest record, Miley Cyrus and Her Dead Petz, which is a collaboration with the Flaming Lips. All that ended up happening was a bunch of very cut-rate, very horrible, very bad, very unbearable dream pop music with almost no direction or musical foresight involved in the creation of this project. It all seems very off the cuff and in the most amateurish way possible. It just kind of made Miley Cyrus seem really ridiculous. I mean, while I know she can be a talented singer if she really applies herself, it seems like she really just kind of wanted to let go of anything and everything just for the sake of proving that her weirdness, her oddity can also work itself into her music as well. But the thing is, I don't feel like the Miley Cyrus equation can work if you take out the pristine pop production that has supplemented her previous efforts. If the music stops being radio-friendly, then what is Miley Cyrus really? Just a walking freak show with dildos strapped onto every part of her body? But before I let go of this LP, there are a few other things worth mentioning. What does it mean? What does it mean?
What to put the dick in a pussy?
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 Fun and games are over, everyone. Because this next album, the number one worst album, in my opinion, that I've reviewed this year, is a record that I've given my lowest score thus far in my YouTube history. And this has just been the year of the 90-minute album, the bad 90-minute album, the hard to listen to, the unbearable, the who the hell made this? Why does this exist? 90-minute album. I admire the musical age that we're in very much because it allows for just wild experimentation, and it allows for artists to go into whatever direction that they want and to really surprise their fans if they want to do that. And while I think that has resulted in some amazing albums that I did not expect to like as much as I enjoyed, it has also resulted in some records that have been a very tough listen because, hey, artists are free to experiment on something great and experiment on something terrible too. Kid Cudi, Speeding Bullet to Heaven. This was the hardest thing to listen to I had to review this year. Not only is it Kid Cudi trying to make a rock album, which in the past he's already proven that he can't do that. So I guess he figured he'd take another whack at it. And he did it in such a way where it was even more of a grand failure than the last attempt he made at making a rock album. Which is kind of weird considering that I think he got closer to making a rock album this time than he did last time. Like an authentic rock album, we're hearing just real grimy, organic kind of analog guitars on this thing. We're hearing real drum sets a lot of the time too. But the I don't want to be here anymore singing that Kid Cudi does just does not fit over this musical style. And not only that, but the songwriting, it's just so vapid. It's just such trash. It's just so effortless. It's like he's not even trying at this point. And almost every single song just shows off these ugly, horrid, just completely detestable emotions. Like, he's so far above the heads of everybody else that just to even simply hear a criticism of his music, he has to completely reject everyone and everything and just travel further down into this musical hermit-like cave dwelling that he's made for himself. And I don't know, I'm really freaked out and scared for what he's going to do next, because it seems like with each album that he gets a negative backlash from, he just goes further and further into the abyss and just makes just uglier, and just more detestable music. And it all seems to be fueled by this desire to, like, what at this point? The thing is, you've come together with so many lackluster projects as a result of this reaction to negative backlash to your art, that it seems like all you're proving at this point is how well you can destroy your music career. I mean, it was cute the first few times when it seemed like, okay, I don't like it, but maybe he's going to prove me wrong. Maybe he's going to show me that he was going in the right direction all this time, and that he's going to blow my mind, he's going to blow everybody else's mind, and there's going to be this aha moment where it's like, I was doing great art. I was making amazing music this whole time. You guys are just too stupid to realize it. But this album, not only is it terrible, but it just kind of feels like we've hit a wall here. Yeah, okay, while I don't think Kid Cudi's next album is going to be great, it can't be worse than this. It can't. It can't be worse than this. It just can't. So even to the Kid Cudi fans who were disappointed in this thing, good news, everyone. Like, the next album has to be better. It has to be better. I did it. I found the silver lining in this cloud over here. It has to be better. The next Kid Cudi record has to be better. Transition. What albums, in your opinion, were the worst of 2015? Albums that you thought might have dug a little deeper into the pits of musical horror than the albums I have portrayed in the video you just watched. I hope you're doing well. List week continues. EPs, albums, singles. You're the best forever.